House Democrats moving one step closer to impeaching President Trump, building their case that he orchestrated a plan to withhold military aid and dangled a White House meeting in exchange for Ukraine announcing investigations into his political rivals. Multiple Democratic sources telling CNN they're hoping to wrap up by Christmas, including holding proceedings before the House Judiciary Committee, drawing up articles of impeachment against Trump and holding a vote on them.
We'll regroup next week and talk about the steps moving forward.
But their investigation has hit some roadblocks, with the White House and State Department both stonewalling Democrats from accessing important documents and having access to top administration officials allegedly involved in the scheme.
What I would like to see happen next is that Ambassador Bolton and Secretary of State Pompeo do exactly what the very brave and courageous people who worked for them did, which is to step forward and put patriotism for their country ahead of their own personal interests.
Still, Speaker Nancy Pelosi says they have enough evidence to press forward.
No, we're not going to wait till the courts decide. We can't wait for that because, again, it's a technique. It's obstruction of justice, obstruction of Congress.
House Republicans disagree.
I think we've had enough. I think it's time to shut it down.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
In the last hearing of the week, former White House national security official Fiona Hill described Ambassador Gordon Sondland's role in Trump's actions towards Ukraine.
He was being involved in a domestic political errand, and we were being involved in national security foreign policy, and those two things had just diverged.
The White House's former top Russia advisor also dismantling Trump's debunked conspiracy theory that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in the 2016 elections.
I refuse to be part of an effort to legitimize an alternate narrative. These fictions are harmful even if they're deployed for purely domestic political purposes.
David Holmes, an aide at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, detailing the phone conversation he overheard between Sondland and President Trump just one day after the president's now famous call with Ukraine's leader.
The president's voice was loud and recognizable. I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it.
Holmes quoting Sondland as saying the president did not care about Ukraine. Instead, he only cared about
big stuff that benefits the president, like the Biden investigation that Mr. Giuliani was pushing.
The White House is now preparing for the inevitable. It was yesterday that Senate Republicans, several of them, met with a top White House attorney to map out their defense strategy for the Senate trial, which is likely to happen as early as next month, John.
Yeah, January seems to be the time frame of that if the House votes on impeachment before Christmas. It's all playing out before us. It's history, Suzanne. Thank you very much.
Speaking to Fox News for nearly an hour this morning, the president blasted the week's witnesses and also welcomed the possibility of a Senate trial if the House votes to impeach, calling on both Congressman Adam Schiff and the whistleblower to testify. Throughout the interview, the president once again repeatedly bringing up debunked conspiracy theories about Ukraine.
Ukraine hated me. They were after me in the election. They wanted Hillary Clinton to win. And when I won, all of a sudden they became so nice. The bottom line is all of those witnesses, they're all shifty shifts. Don't forget, there was no due process. You can't have lawyers. We couldn't have any witnesses. Right. We want to call the whistleblower. But you know who I want as the first witness? Because, frankly, I want a trial. You know, I could have it.
You want a trial?
Whatever I want. Oh, I would. Look, number one, they should never, ever impeach. This is not impeach. I watched 5 people on your network yesterday say there's nothing here.
Withholding millions of dollars in critical U.S. military aid and an official White House visit while pushing for the announcement of an investigation into the Bidens and the 2016 election. A move the president's former top Russia advisor described as a, quote, domestic political errand.
And then the accusation comes in that your ambassador is being tarnished by Rudy Giuliani.
Look, the ambassador, the woman, she wouldn't even put up, she's an Obama person, you know. But I said, why are you being so kind? Well, sir, she's a woman. We have to be nice. She's very tough. I heard bad things And by the way, when I was talking to President Zelensky, it's right on the phone. You can read it.
Yep.
He didn't like her.
I obviously don't dispute that the president has the right to withdraw an ambassador at any time for any reason. But what I do wonder is why it was necessary to smear my reputation.
I know her to be an incredibly competent professional, someone I've worked with for many, many years. The suggestions that she was acting in some inappropriate manner were not credible to me.
Rudy Giuliani is a very legendary figure in our country. Rudy was the U.S. attorney. He also worked at the Justice Department. Believe me, this kind of crap wouldn't have happened in the Justice Department if Rudy Giuliani was the attorney general, just like I believe Bill Barr will straighten it out and straighten it out for good. But Rudy Giuliani was one of the great crime fighters of all time.
And I worried about what I had heard concerning the role of Rudy Giuliani, who had made several controversial statements about Ukraine.
I believe that the messages being conveyed by Mr. Giuliani were a problem.
My recollection is that Ambassador Sondland stated, quote, "Damn it, Rudy. Every time Rudy gets involved, he goes and..."
So Fiona Hill not only owned these congressional hearings, she's also owning late night comedy. Here are your late night laughs.
Dr. Hill grew up in England and came into the hearing with a reputation for not suffering fools lightly. Once, a boy in her class set one of her pigtails on fire while she was taking a test. She put out the fire with her hands, then finished the test. Oh my gosh. She is...
Ooh, that's fierce.
That's tough. That is tough. Forget Pippi Longstocking. She's Pippi ass-kicking.
In other political news, according to a recent article, White House aides have been worried that President Trump spends too much time alone and isolated. Yeah. At this point, the only friends Trump has left are his Fox and friends. According to the article, Trump's aides are desperately trying to come up with any solution, well, except for the obvious one. They're like, I'm worried the president is alone and isolated. They're like, well, go and hang out with him. I've got that root canal I've been putting off. Oddly, under those exact same conditions, Melania seems to be thriving.
You know what they could do? They could do play dates, right? That's what you do with your kids when they're not getting out. They should set up play dates for the president.
That's a great idea.
Right?
I hope they're listening. That's a great... Yeah, you're just a solution factory.
Sandbox?
Right here. Why not?
Yeah, sandbox. Kids love the sandbox.
Well, I think you might recall in my deposition on October 14th that I said that very unfortunately I had a bit of a blow-up with Ambassador Sondland, and I had a couple of testy encounters with him. One of those was in June 18, when I actually said to him, who put you in charge of Ukraine? And, you know, I'll admit I was a bit rude, and that's when he told me the president, which shut me up. And this other meeting, it was about 15, 20 minutes, exactly as he depicted it was. I was actually, to be honest, angry with him. And, I hate to say it, but often when women show anger, it's not fully appreciated. It's often, pushed onto emotional issues, perhaps, or deflected onto other people. And what I was angry about was that he wasn't coordinating with us. Now, I actually realised, having listened to his deposition, that he was absolutely right, that he wasn't coordinating with us because we weren't doing the same thing that he was doing. So I was upset with him that he wasn't fully telling us about all of the meetings that he was having. And he said to me, but I'm briefing the president, I'm briefing Chief of Staff Mulvaney, I'm briefing Secretary Pompeo, and I've talked to Ambassador Bolton. Who else do I have to deal with? And the point is we have a robust interagency process that deals with Ukraine. It includes Mr. Holmes, it includes Ambassador Taylor as the chargé in Ukraine, it includes a whole load of other people. But it struck me yesterday when you put up on the screen Ambassador Sondland's emails and who was on these emails, and he said, these are the people who need to know, that he was absolutely right, because he was being involved in a domestic political errand. And we were being involved in national security foreign policy, and those two things had just diverged. So he was correct, and I had not put my finger on that at the moment, But I was irritated with him and angry with him that he wasn't fully coordinating. And I did say to him, Ambassador Sondland, Gordon, I think this is all going to blow up, and here we are. And after I left to my next meeting, our director for the European Union talked to him much further for a full half hour or more later, trying to ask him about how we could coordinate better, or how others could coordinate better after I had left the office. And his feeling was that the National Security Council was always trying to block him. What we were trying to do was block us from straying into domestic or personal politics. And that was precisely what I was trying to do. But Ambassador Sondland is not wrong that he had been given a different remit than we had been. And it was at that moment that I started to realize how those things had diverged. And I realized, in fact, that I wasn't really being fair to Ambassador Sondland because he was carrying out what he thought he had been instructed to carry out. And we were doing something that we thought was just as, or perhaps even more important, but it wasn't in the same channel.